Okay, gewaltig. So we are on the Tzadik Tesh Amar Aleph, and yesterday we learned about the layout of the multiple Shulchan Aruchs that were in the Beis Hamikdash, and using the diagrams, there were two ways that they might have set them up. If they set them up Mizrach L'Mayrev, there were two rows, and the original Shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu was not in between the two rows, which allowed the two rows to be only 2.5 amos apart. It was up in front. Rashi says that there was also a slope where the western side, closest to the Kodesh HaKodeshim, was a little bit higher, and the as we moved towards the east, the elevation got lower. So it was like a Rebbe sitting in front of his Talmidim. Now, the other option was if they were set up from north to south, then it could have even been with Moshe Rabbeinu's Shulchan being in the middle, because they would still fit on the northern half of the Heichal. The key was that it was supposed to be in this quadrant, the western half of the Heichal. So if the Heichal was 40 amas, it should be in the 20 amas closest to the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and it had to be in the northern half, because we know that the Shulchan was B'tzafain, and the menorahs were B'darin. Just an interesting factoid to note is that whenever we draw drawings, we always have our orientation of north on top. So the top of our drawing is north, this would be west, and this would be east. However, in the ancient drawings, like in the times of Rashi, they would always have it with east on the top. Although in this particular case, we're showing Moshe's Shulchan over here, it's Moshe's Shulchan is to the west, but it's also on top. So the orientation of the ancient pictures that you would find in the Rishonim, like over here, you can see Mizrach is at the top. They're showing that on the map, Mizrach is on top. Here you can see Tzafon is on the left, and Dorim is on the right, which would mean that Mizrach would be on the top as well. But that's not the orientation that we usually have on our diagrams. Okay, so we are up to Tanu Rabbanon. Good morning, Davi. Asar Shulchanois Asa Shloima. Shloima HaMelech made 10 Shulchanois. V'loi hayu misadrin ella al Shem Moshe, al Shel Moshe. But where did they put the lechem upon him? Only on the table of Moshe. Now, there's a lot of discussion here in the Achronim why there is no Isser of Baal Tosef. The Torah teaches us to make one Shulchan, and in the Beis Hamikdash of Shlomo HaMelech, there were 11 Shulchanos. So there's grade about the following issue. We know that the dimensions of the Beis Hamikdash were much larger than the dimensions of the Mishkan. So it could be that when it comes to size and amounts, that was not the Gzeres HaKosov. The Gzeres HaKosov was for the Mishkan, yet for the Beis Hamikdash, everything was on a much grander scale. So that could be the Isser Baal Tosef would not apply to these halachas. Now, V'loi hayu misadrin al Shel Moshe.
This had to be done by Nevuah. You couldn't just by yourself make a decision.
Right.
Okay.
But it's not likely that the Nevuah would directly instruct Shlomo HaMelech to violate a law of Baal Tosef.
Yeah, but once you have a Nevuah, so the psukim are based on a Mishkan. But the Beis Hamikdash had a whole.
The mention of Beis Hamikdash was based on the Nevuah. The mentions of the Mishkan did not apply to the Beis Hamikdash.
Right.
Shenemar, it says, "V'esar shulchan asher alav lachem aponim zohov." So clearly, the pasuk is talking about an individual shulchan, If it's speaking about an individual shulchan, that means that was the one. So let's look at where this pasuk is. Vayash shloima es kol hakelim asher beis Hashem eis mizbach hazav ve'eis ha-shulchan asher olav lechem aponim zav. The shulchan that had the lechem aponim. This is the shita of the Tanakama. Shenemar menorah hazav. 1 second. Okay, then there were 10 menorahs that Shlomo Melech made, and again, shenemar menorahs hazav v'neiroseha levaer ba'erev. So let's see the pasuk inside. That's in Divrei Yamim. Umaktir l'Hashem oilos ba'boiker uva erev ba'erev uktoris samim umareches lechem al hashulchan hator u menorahs hazav v'neirasah. The individual menorah and its neiros. So in fact, although there were 10 menorahs, only one was lit. Rabbi Elazar ben Shemu Omer al kulam hayu misadrin. They actually would put lechem aponim on all of the 11 shulchanos. Shenemar es hashulchanos va'aleihem, all in plural lashon lechem aponim. Let's see the pasuk inside. Also a pasuk in Divrei Yamim. Vayash shloimo es kol hakelim asher beiso elikim ves mizbech hazav ves hashulchanos va'aleihem lechem aponim. Uvechulon hayu madlikin. And when you were referencing the menorah, they also lit on all the menorahs. Shenemar es ha-menorahs v'nei reisehen levahiram kamishpat. Lefnei advir, in front of the Kodesh HaKodeshim, Zav Sagar, the purest of gold, again, once again referencing the menorah. Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda Omer, Loi hayu mesadrin, ela al shal Moshe. They were only mesader on the nearest of Moshe. I'm sorry, on the shulchan of Moshe. So now we're going to go back to understand this machlokes. But first, let's get one important tidbit of information. Where Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua said, Al kulan hayu mesadrin, they put lechem upon him on all of the shulchanos. Rashi says it's not what we think. Rather, zokt Rashi, Al kulan hayu mesadrin, pa'amim bozeh u'pa'amim bozeh. There was only one set of lechem upon him per day. However, per week that is. However, they didn't always use exclusively the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu. They used the different shulchanos. There are Rishonim who argue and hold that they were mesader lechem upon him on every shulchan. But Rashi clearly says they were only mesader the lechem upon him on one. Okay, gewaltig. Zok to Gemara weiter. Do we have a pasuk that seems to indicate otherwise? This is the pasuk that Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua brought. Do you know what that's referring to? There was the one shulchan, but as they were exchanging the lechem upon him, they used 2 other tables. Because there were 2 other tables, Shnaim Shahayu B'ulam Bifnim Lepesach Habayis. In the ulam, before you got into the actual heichal, they had 2 tables set up. Echot Shel Kesef. One was silver, which Rashi says was not really silver, rather it was made out of marble. But since the marble is white, the Gemara is using the word silver. So the Rashi says, Shnaim Shoyim Ulam Mibifnim, it's a Pesach Hegel, Echad Shel Kesef, Vechad Shel Zov, V'hai Dekari Hachal Kesef, Uva Masnisin, in the mission that we're going to learn soon, it's referred to as Shayish, Mishum Deshayish Lovan Kekesef. So I'm not sure, was it really marble, was it really Kesef, but what Rashi says is those identifications are interchangeable. Okay. The Pesach is about Echad Shel Kesef, V'echad Shel Zov. Al shal zov noisen lechem aponim bich. Al shal kesef noisen lechem aponim bichnis asay. So you had a group of kohanim that brought in the lechem aponim, the new fresh lechem aponim that was going to be loaded up onto the shulchan, and they rested it on the table of Kesef. B'chnisasei Rashi says, Kishemagin lePesach, manichin oisai, alav, v'ayim lafish, and they stop to rest. So they climb up the stairs into the Heichal, and they put the bread down before they enter the Heichal itself to do the swap. They stop to rest. V'al shalzov b'yitziyasei, and on the way out, the table that they put the outgoing lechem upon them on, so that they could take a little bit of a rest, it was a different table. It was made out of gold. V'sham hayamunach achiyukteru habazichin kedegatani masnisin. So they took the bazichin levina and the lechem upon him off the shulchan on Shabbos afternoon. They placed the lechem upon him on that gold table that was in the ulam. Then the two Kayanim went to be maktir the bazichin levina, after which the lechem was then distributed. So why is it that on the way in, the breads go on a silver table, yet on the way out, they go on a golden table? Shemaylim b'kodesh v'loy maritin. Because when it comes to divrei kedusha, you always go up. And then there's, of course, the actual shulchan that the lechem upon him rested on all week long. Zokt Rashi Shemaylim b'kodesh kagoyin b'chnisasei manichay al shal kesef. When the lechem upon him is on its way in to the heichal, it's placed on the silver table. Then it was put onto a gold-plated table. Harei aliyah. That's definitely a step up. But loy meridin, you don't take a step down. L'kach b'yitziyasei manichay al shal zav. And that's why on the way out, it was placed on the golden table. So the Welt asks, if it's Ma'alim HaKodesh, I obviously know V'loi Maridin. So why does it have to say Ma'alim HaKodesh, V'loi Maridin? Isn't that by definition Ma'alim HaKodesh? If you're going up, you're not going down. So I heard over, I believe from maybe the Apteruv, that Ma'alim HaKodesh, when it comes to different Kedusha, you always have to strive to grow. V'loi, if you stagnate, it's inevitable that it will lead to Maridin. That's the derech tzachas. Zokt Gemara uminol de'en maridin. Where do we have this rule from that you could never lower the standards when it comes to different kedusha? Amarebi de Amakra vayakam Moshe es hamishkan. So this is in Sefer Shemois. It says, I think it's a samach. I can't even see so good. Mem, Perk Mem. So it's probably like a Yakal Bekuda area. Vayakam Moshe es hamishkan. Vayite des Hadonov. Vayasem es Karashov. Vayite des Berichov. Vayakim es Hamudov. So how do you see in this pasuk Ma'alim HaKodesh V'Ein Maridin? Rashi, we have three different ways how you see from this pasuk of Ma'alim HaKodesh V'Loi Maridin. So let's see Rashi inside. Vayakam Moshe es hamishkan. First of all, Midireisha v'Sefer Dekra. Since the pasuk begins with Vayakam and it ends with the word Vayakam, Midireisha v'Sefer Dekra b'Loshen Hakama, it's a Loshen of up. Ta'afilu b'Tzachas Haloshen Eloi Hurad. It didn't even use an expression, a different type of expression, when we're describing how the Mishkan was set up. Rather, it repeats the word Vayakam, Vayakam, from the fact that the Torah uses the word Vayakam over and over again. Shema mina ein maridin. That's how you see this concept of ein maridin. It's from a language choice of the Torah. The inami, or it might be because of the actual occurrence of what happened. Once Moshe, who's the greatest of all, Moshe Rabbeinu. Once Moshe Rabbeinu himself, started to work on setting up the Mishkan, if any other Kohen or Levi or Yisrael would have taken over, it would have been a downgrade. From the fact that you see the Loisa Yuyu, Echav HaKohanim, Ba'akamas Ha'amudim, Va'adonim, no one was able to help him. He did it all by himself. Shema mina ein maridin. It would be a step down, and therefore only Moshe Rabbeinu did it. Again, you see this concept of Ma'alim HaKodesh V'Ein Maridin. Lefichach loydnis asku boy acherim. But Lishna China, there's even a third shot that Rashi offers. Meikara, Vayoka Moshe es a Mishkan. Mishkan is not referring to the Kroshim of the Mishkan at the beginning of the pasuk. It's referring to the hides that was the roof of the Mishkan. He would spread out the Urios and lift them up. But he wouldn't put them down to the side to now start setting up the Kroshim. Rather, he held them in place. So even though he was holding the Urios to spread them out, he didn't just drop them and now start working on the rest of the Mishkan. Rather, he held them onto them the whole time. He must have been a superhuman because these Kroshim were very, very heavy. So I'm sure it was b'derech nice. Okay. Zok to Gemara weiter. You ever saw Moshe's biceps? Zok to Gemara weiter. So back to the Gemara. So either from a Dikah Loshen, or because Moshe Rabbeinu did it by himself, or because he didn't let go of the Uriah Mishkan once he started working with them. So that's how you know Ein Maritin. Uminayim the Mailan. So I know you don't drop down a level, but how do you know you go up a level? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was the same Moshe Rabbeinu throughout, right? Throughout his construction of the Mishkan. Omar Bach Yaakov, the Omar Kra, when it came to the people who took the Machtos, but as a Skayach. It says, what should you do with all those Machtos, all those people who died when they were bringing the Torah of Eish Zorah? So the Torah instructs Moshe Rabbeinu as a Machtos Achatoim Ha'ela B'naf Shoisam, V'osu Oisam Rikue Pachim Tzipil Mizbeach. They actually used it as a plating. They plated the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach Achitoin was made out of copper. I guess their Machtos are made out of copper. And they plated the Mizbeach with those Machtos. Once they were brought, they were used to bring Ketayos on the Mizbeach. They became Kodesh, and therefore, Yisrael, don't step out of line, don't grab a job that doesn't belong to you. So Zok to Gemara, what do you see from there? Zok to Gemara, these were merely machtos, accessories that serviced the Mizbeach, but they got upgraded. The achshav gufa shel Mizbeach. By making them into a plating of the Mizbeach, they now become a part of the Mizbeach. That's definitely a promotion. It's definitely a step up. It also says, Asher shibarta v'samtem ba'arin. So we're talking about the Shvius Haluchos. It says, Ve'echtav al haluchos es advarim, Asher hayu al haluchos v'yishonim asher shibarta, comma. So if you read the pasuk in its Pashat Pshat, we're speaking about, I'm going to write on the second luchos the same thing that we wrote on the first luchos. The samtim ba'arin, the second luchos put in the arin. But we're going to see in a moment that it's referring to the first luchos, and that's why it says asher shibarta v'samtim. And the broken luchos also went into the arin. Asher shibarta v'samtim ba'arin, Tani Rabbi Yosef malamed shaluchos v'shiver luchos munachin ba'arin. Mikan, you see from here, the Talmud Chacham sheshachach Talmudai, a Talmud Chacham who forgot his learning, machmas ointzai, not because he was negligent, but because as he got older, he wasn't able to retain it anymore. We don't reduce the level of respect that we have for such a person. Rather, we continue to give the same respect to the person who was a Talmud Chacham, but due to health factors, he no longer can can remember what he said. So it's very interesting to note who is the author of this Maimer, Rabbi Yosef. Tani Rabbi Yosef, Malamed Shaluchas and Shivaluchas Munachim Baran. Rabbi Yosef is known, he forgot his learning at the end. He got old, he was Abaye's Rebbe, and they would often remind him of things that he said. He's the one who's saying that She'ei Noeg by Minig B'Zayim. Now there's another interesting point to point out over here. We celebrate as the day of the Kabbalah HaTorah Shavuos. The problem is Shavuos is the day we receive the first luchos that ultimately Moshe destroyed. The second luchos, the final luchos that we received on Yom Kippur. So why is it that we make the whole big deal on Shavuos, which is not a good day? That's a day where we have broken luchos. Why wouldn't we celebrate Shavuos the day that we have our luchos that remained intact?
We don't even have the Shavuos. We didn't even receive the luchos. Tisha B'av, he came down, wasn't it? What we had on Shavuos
The Meraglim came on Tisha B'av. Didn't the Meraglim come on Tisha
B'av? Yeah, maybe. Oh, that was the following year, wasn't it? Anyway, the Aseret Dibros was 40 days later. He came down with the luchos. Aseret Dibros, I think, was Shavuos.
But nevertheless, Shavuos is not associated with the luchos achronos. It's associated with
the with the first ones, right?
So why is that the day? It's really a day we should try to forget. It's the day that we messed up.
Right, but it has the same material on it, doesn't it?
That's right. It has the same writing. Matan Torah is referred to as when Moshe came with the luchos, or Matan Torah is referred to the day of the Aseret Dibros.
I think it's the Aseret Dibros.
I also thought, yeah. Okay. And the Aseret Dibros was before or after the luchos came?
It was before. 40 days before.
Uh-huh. So, but by the time of Matan Torah, by the time of the Aseret Dibros, how did Moshe be up there for 40 years, for 40 days already? Or
no, he just got there.
Oh, he just got up there, the Aseret Dibros, and then they left.
Or he wasn't even there. Actually, there's somebody said a chabura that he wasn't even on top of the mountain by Aseret Dibros, because the Bnei Yisrael asked him to stop at
go
2.
Between. So if he was up there, how could they have asked him?
Yeah, right. So after the Aseret Dibros, he went up to receive the luchos, but I think he stayed up there for 40 days and 40 nights.
He stayed for the reception.
But there was no food, so he says he didn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. What kind of a reception is that?
That's why he was the only one who stayed. When everyone saw the menu, they were
right.
Okay. So Zok Gemara, so Rabbi Yosef said, Ilav hayoyma, kama Yosy kibishuka. If it wasn't for the day of Matan Torah, I'd be a regular Joe. Which Rabbi Yosef, was he a Balgaiva? I'm the great guy. Ilav hayoyma, kama Yosy kibishuka. The answer to that is no. What he was saying is, Ilav hayoyma, I lost the Torah because I forgot my learning. Ilav hayoyma, that the Torah was given, and the Torah was given, and the luchos broke, and we still see that we're machshav the luchos hashavuros. They also got into the Aron. Ilav hayoyma kama Yosy kibushuka. I would be nothing now because I had already forgotten my learning. So it's a day of Shavuos, or the day of the Shviras haluchos, that gives significance even to a Talmud Chacham sheshachach Talmudai machmas einsay. She'inayim boy minik b'zayin. Amar Shlakish pa'amim shebitula. Sometimes it's the opposite. That being mevatel the Torah shebitula shel Torah zeu yisoida. That's what keeps it up. As neslasos lashem hefer seresecha. As Rashi says, because when shemevatel Torah leitzas hameis ulachnos is kala. That's being Mekayim the Torah, even though you have to take away from learning to do things that are necessary. If someone does mitzvahs that are mandated by the Torah, that he does, even though he could be learning Torah in that time, that's not called taking away from the Torah, that's fulfilling the Torah. One of the great praises at the end of the Chumash that the Torah gives to Moshe is that he broke the luchos. And everybody asks, what's the godless of that he broke the luchos? But whatever the different terutzim are, Shema mina hiskima imay das hashchina kishabita al Torah v'shivra. Clearly, we see that the Torah, the Rebbeinu Shalom, was happy with the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, even in his chav and l'tova, his intent was good. And most of the Mefarshim tell us that this was the pinnacle of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. It's what he lived for, to bring down the Torah to Klal Yisrael. And when he finally reached the pinnacle of his life, he had to give it all away. That's pure Mesiras Nefesh. He gave it all away. He wanted to save Klal Yisrael. If the luchos aren't there, it's killer. The contract is broken, and therefore we wouldn't be condemned. So he gave up his own personal life's goal just for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. The Chsiv Asher Shibarta. Amalek HaLivrach LaMoshe Yiyasher Kochacha Sheshibarta. Accolades to you. I'm happy that you broke it. V'omer Reish Lakish Talmud Chacham Shesorach. Even if a Talmud Chacham did an Avera and he went bad, Ein Mevazah Noisai B'far Hesya. You're not Mevazah him in public. Shenemar, it says in the Pasuk, V'chashalta hayoim, v'chashal gam novi imach laila. And a novi will also do an Avera with you at night. What does that mean? Kiso kalayla. Even if the novi does an Avera, you should cover it over. You shouldn't publicize it. He might have to be admonished, but he doesn't have to be publicly humiliated, which is a stira to a famous mimer, a mimer of Rav Berish. We call it a Berishism. Because Rav Berish used to ask, why is it that when a chassan speaks, we sing in, when a bar mitzvah boy speaks, we sing in, and the reason for it is, Kedei shaloi lavai yochel. If the chassan is not a Talmud Chacham, and he doesn't know how to speak, at least we don't embarrass him, we sing him down. So for extra embarrass, how come you don't do that for a roof? So he says, because if a roof gets up and doesn't know what he's talking about, you should be embarrassed him. So that's why you don't have that minig by a roof. But you see over here, you're still not supposed to embarrass him. Somebody who forgets some of his learning is over a lav. Shenemar Hishamer lacha ushmor nafshecha ma'oid pen tishkach es hadvarim uchad Rab Avin Amar Belo to Amar Rab Avin Amar Belo kol makim shenemar. If the Torah uses the word Hishamer, pen or va'al, those words al pen and Hishamer einoi elo loisase, it's a loisase. Now you might ask, it says all of these three words. It says Hishamer, it says pen. It says Hishamer and he says pen. So how come it's only one lav? So we're going to soon learn, other Manda Amrim will learn from this pasuk that there's multiple lavin over here. But the Tanakama holds Hishamer l'chol shmor nafshecha ma'oid. The rest are all describing what the Hishamer is. So therefore it's all considered under the one heading of Hishamer l'chol shmor nafshecha, which is one lav. But Ravina Amar, no, you break it down. Hishamer and pen, shnei lavin. So if someone forgets his learning, he's over two lavin. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, it's b'shloi shalavin, it's three lavin. Shenemar Hishamer l'cha u'shmor nafshecha ma'oid pen tishkach es hadvar. Yachal afilu machmas einsai. You would think that even if you forgot it, not because you wanted to go away from it, but it was out of your control. Not every human mind is like a camera, and sometimes it's human to forget. How do you know there's no love there? You might push away the Torah from your heart. The Torah only is condemning someone who pushes the words of Torah away. He's not interested in them anymore. But if someone still has that thirst for learning, but we're humans, we forget, there's no love there. Rabbi Destoy Bar Yanai Amar Yochal Afilu Takfalav Mishnasai. Takfalav Mishnasai doesn't even mean he forgot. It's Shaloi Yochal Lahamid Yisasai. He's not such a big Talmud Chacham, and he has problems understanding everything and absorbing everything. You might think that's a problem. And therefore, there's no problem whatsoever. Every Yid will understand what he learns, kafi, the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him, and that's the ultimate in good. There's no issue with that only for someone who wants to reject the words of the Torah. Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Elazar Damar Tavayu, Torah nitna ba'arbaim. The Torah was given through 40 days. Unishama naitra ba'arbam. And we know that the Yitzirus of the Shama is 40 days, right? Arbaim yom kodim Yitzirus of Vlad. The Yitzirus of Vlad takes 40 days. And we learn from here, if someone watches his Torah, nishmasai mish averis. His neshama will be watched by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We take care of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's treasure, He'll take care of our treasure. V'chol she'ein mishameres HaTorah, ein nishmasai mishtameres. Tana dever b'shmuel, mashal la'adam, shemasar tzibur dvar la'avdai. A person gave a little bird to his eved. There's a whole shiloh in the Rishonim even what a tzibur dvar means. Is it just a generic term for a tzibur, or is it referring to a bird called a swallow? He gave it to his eved, very inexpensive bird. Amar, he said, you think, if you destroy the bird, you purposely neglect it and you don't take care of it properly, you think, I'm just going to ask you for what the financial value of it is in the market. $1? No. Because of its life, as payment for it? No. If something happens to this bird that I find to be very precious, even though it doesn't seem like it's anything so special, I'll take your life away. So that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to vigilantly guard the Torah. There are 2 shulchanos in the ulam. Al Pesach Habayis, at the entrance walking into the Hechel, Echad Shal Shayish, one of marble on the right, the Echad Shal Zav on the left. Al Shal Shayish Noistim Lechem Apanim Bichnisosei. On their way in, they stop to rest. The Al Shal Zav Vitziosei, while they're waiting for the kohen to be maktir on the Mizbeach, the Bazichi Lavoina, Shemayel Mekodesh V'loy Maridin, the Echad Shal Zav V'bifnim, and then there was the main Shulchan in the Echel, Shal Olav Lechem Apanim Tamid, the Arba Kayanim Nechnosim, when the new shift of Lechem Apanim were brought in, they were brought in through the services of 4 Kayanim. Shnayim biyadam shnei sedarim. Each of the 2 Kayanim held 6 pieces of bread, 6 Lechem Apanim piled up on each other. Ushnayim biyadam shnei bazichim. And the other 2 brought 2 bazichim. You might ask, a bazich, a small little spoon, couldn't one Kayan hold both? The teretz they're trying to say is because the bazich levaina were considered like making the kemitza of a carbon mincha, and you have to have a separate coin for each kemitza. V'arba makdimin lefneim. Now these kohanim that were carrying the new batch of lechem aponim were preceded by an additional 4 kohanim that were going to be responsible for removing the lechem aponim that was there for the past week. Shnayim litos shnei sedarim. 2 kohanim want to take each one a pile of bread. Those who walk in are on the north side, which is the right side, but they face the south. So clearly, this Mishnah is going according to the Tana, who hold that the table was set up from east to west. So they were standing on the north side of the table, facing south. And those who are going to be removing the bread, they were standing on the south, facing the north, so there's 2 on one side of the table, 2 on the other side of the table, and they're facing each other. 2 Kohanim are pulling the old breads off, and the others are pushing the new breads on. Every tefach that they pulled out, the lechem that's being removed, they replaced. So basically, the shulchan never was without lechem apanim on it, because as they're pushing the new ones in, it's pushing the old ones out. It reminds me of some screwdrivers that have these bits that you pull out on top and push on the bottom. Or remember the lead pencils that we grew up with, right? No, I'm talking about the ones that have a whole bunch of small little bits that you pull the top out. You're talking about the ones that you pump. No, I'm talking about when there's a piece you took out, and then you pushed it at the bottom and push the next one up. There always has to be lechem upon there. Rabbi Yosy, you don't have to do it like that. They could take them off completely. The shulchan is vacated, and then you put a new one on. Tamid. That's also tamid. Tamid just means it didn't stay overnight, as we'll see, without lechem upon on it. The people who remove the lechem aponim, put it on the shulchan azav, shoya b'ulam, that was in the ulam as we discussed. Hiktiru havazichen, they were marked to the bazichen, and then v'chalois mischalkus l'kayhana. What if it was Yom Kippurim, where you can't eat the bread? Kol Yom Kippurim lias b'Shabbos, hachalois mischalkos le'erev. So then they would give out the chalos motzei Yom Kippur. Chal lias b'erev Shabbos. Now, in our calendar, it cannot happen. But when they were mekadosh the levana, the chodesh with the levana, it could happen. So you could have a Yom Kippur that's erev Shabbos. So the problem is, when would they eat the karbonis of Yom Kippur? Normally you would eat it Matzah Yom Kippur, but you can't cook them. So Yom Kippurim nechal erev, you eat it at night. But when would you cook it? The Bavliim would eat it kishuchai. They ate it raw. Because they had a good das. There's a big discussion if that means they were barbaric, and that's what it means. They could eat it raw, or is it a compliment? That's going to be a discussion. Tanya of Yosy Eimer, afilu silek es hayishana shachvis, v'sider es hachadasha arvis. Even if you pulled out the old one in the morning and you only put on the new ones in the afternoon, that's still acceptable. It just means we don't want to leave it overnight. We can learn from here. Even if you only learn a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the afternoon, if it's called Tamid, by just having the shulchan, the lechem aponim on the shulchan, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, so who did with learning, it could be called Tamid as well. He was still Mekayim L'Yomush. Don't say to Amoritz, because they're going to say, hey, I don't have to learn. I can just say Krishma. For Rav Amar, Pung Fakert. You know why? Because they'll see, if you get so much schar for such a little bit of Torah, imagine how much schar I would get for more. Shol ben Dama. Ben Achoisai Shol Rabbi Shmuel. So the nephew of Rabbi Shmuel asked as Rabbi Shmuel, Kegoyin shalamadati kol Torah kula. I who've learned kol Torah kula, ma'u lilmod chachmas yivanis. Can I learn secular subjects? Now there's a shiloh what chachmas yivanis is, and there's also different gersais where this story is related. It could either mean secular subjects, that are those who learned it was special type of sign language that the dignitaries used so that they could communicate. You would want to learn it if you would want to be involved. You wanted to be a lobbyist, you'd have to learn it to communicate with the politicians. So Karalav HaMikra, Rabbi Shmuel answered his nephew in the following fashion: Lo Yama Shefar Torah Zavi Picha and Vagisa Ba Yomam V'Layla. When do you have to learn Yom and V'Layla? So he said, no problem. If you can find a part of the day that's not night and not day, and I don't mean Bein HaShemashos, that's where you could. The only time where there's no chiyuv to learn Torah is if it's not night and not day. In other words, even if you learn Kol Torah Kula, you still have to learn every moment. So this is a whole Torah about, do you learn Torah so that you could do the halachas, so you could accomplish a Torah? Or do you have to learn Torah for the mitzvah of learning Torah? Here you see there's a mitzvah of learning Torah. Even if you already have all the information, you still have to learn Torah. Yeah, I guess then he would be allowed to. That's right. The Vilgoy did math in the ashram. Zok to Gemara, upliga the Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Dam Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Omer Yonason, pasuk zeh einoi loy chayva v'loy mitzvah el bracha. Fakir, this is not the Torah saying you must learn. It's giving you a bracha. Bracha, the bracha is Yeshua. Shedivrei Torah chavivim alav v'yoser. The bracha saw that Yeshua loved Torah. Shenemar mishar so Yeshua ben Nun nar lo yamish mitoich ha'oil. Yeshua was always in the Besmedrash. He saw Yeshua was connected to learning. His whole life was learning. Amalek Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yeshua kol kach avivin alecha divrei Torah. Since you love Torah so much, I'm giving you a bracha that lo yamush sefer Torah azem picha. You will be zoicha to always have Torah. Tan Rabbi Shmuel divrei Torah lo yehu alecha chayva. You should not treat learning Torah like it's an obligation. And you're not allowed to say, okay, I learned, I accomplished my quota that I have to do, and now, phew, I'm done. No, it has to be something that you want more and more and more of. It says, mipi tsar rachav loy mutzak tachteha. Now, this is referring to Dr. Rashi. Va'af hisischa kadosh baruch hu. Now, normally the word mesis means to tantalize somebody and to get him to do something bad. You give him you provoke him to do something bad. You give him taiva. Hakadosh Baruch Hu did that with the Torah to us in a good way. Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Lil my Torah. You know why? Kidei notzim al Gehenim. So Abava Tzischa, Hakadosh Baruch Hu fools us or tantalizes us to get us to learn Torah. Why? To save us mipi tsar, from the place that's very tight. What's tsar? That's referring to Gehenim. Why is Gehenim a small, tight entrance? Its smoke should be concentrated in it. You know why? We want them to have a high concentration of punishment. Rachav loy mutzak takta boy urei shaloi kemidas hakadosh baruch hu midas basav adam. Midas basav adam adam meses as chaverei midar kechaim lidar kemisa. Usually, your bad influence is going to convince you to do bad things, not good things. But Vakadosh Baruch Hu, he's meses as a adam midar kemisa lidar kechayim shenemar va'afei sischa mipitzar. What does that mean? Migehenim shapiyat tsar. Why is this piatzar? Sha'ashana tzavar b'soicha. Its smoke will be concentrated in it to punish the Oiver Avera. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu lures us away from there. V'shem etaymer kishem shapiatzar kach kulay tzara. You might think just like the entrance is bad, the whole thing is bad. Talmud Omer hamek hirche, which is a later posuk, which means that Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to make it big and broad, meaning Hashem is going to help us. V'shem etaymer lamelech lehuchna. You might say that the Gehenim is not for the Melech. And what is a Melech, Dr. Rashi? It's referring to the Talmud Shapirish Min Torah. You might think that a Talmud Chacham who left learning, you might think he's immune to Gehenim. Lehuchna Gehenim, Shelo Yenidim Ba. Rashi says that Melech Kari Talmud Chacham. You find that the Torah uses the word Melech to describe a Talmud Chacham, the Chsiv, Bimalachim Yimloichu. Talmud Leimer, Gam Hila Melech Uchad. This Gehenim is also for the Melech, for a Talmud Chacham who leaves the path. You might say there's no eitzim there. It means it's not going to last long. The fire of Gehenim is limitless. You might say, what does the pasuk say? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu meses somebody to learn Torah to protect them from Gehenim. So you might think that's the whole schar. The whole schar is you don't get anything great. You just get protected from Gehenim. Talmud Loimer, no. Menachos shulchancha malei deshen. Your shulchan will be full of food and full of wonderful things. In other words, the Torah is going to bring to the greatest parnasa as well. Okay, let's stop here. There's so much raid on this, on these